Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1958, It, The Terror from Beyond Space. Now this stars Marshall Thompson, Shirley Patterson and Kim Spaulding and was directed by prolific B-movie filmmaker Edward L. Cahn. Now you may be tempted to skip this review as it may seem this is just another 1950s generic sci-fi monster movie, a stereotypical B-movie, the kind that were churned out in great numbers in the new atomic age. And you'd be right, mostly. But listen to this. The Terror from Beyond Space's premise is as follows. Now, a rescue mission to an inhospitable planet brings back a single survivor from a crashed spaceship. On the return journey, it transpires that an alien life form is now aboard their vessel, seemingly indestructible. It hides in air vents, ready to pounce, picking off the crew members one by one. Now, widely accepted as being a huge influence on and inspiration for Dan O'Bannon's screenplay for 1979's Alien, and so by association, this is one of the most influential movies ever made. Let's take a look. So It, The Terror from Beyond Space, although of course featuring many striking similarities to Ridley Scott's xenomorph masterpiece, is a work that stands alone on its own highly entertaining merits. Here, of course, the story involves a mission to Mars to recover the sole survivor of the Challenge 141 craft, after apparently its lieutenant murdered the rest of the crew. Now, of course, he claims that his crew were killed by a hostile alien life form, which is clearly a load of far-fetched nonsense. Or is it? Yeah, sometimes when we chat about classic films here, I get to talk about these towering achievements of film, and sometimes it's just to talk about cult favourites that are ripe for rediscovery. But I feel this film sits in a little subsection of that. If you're watching it free from context, it's just a guy in a rubber suit half-heartedly chasing some folks up and down a rocket ship. It's a science fiction film that's less interested in the science part and more interested in the B-movie thrills. Its cast of straight-talking, workman-like guys do have a down-to-earth quality about them as they sit and play chess and drink coffee over the breakfast table. I love the fact that there's also two women on this mission who, as well as being the nurses, are also the cooks, cleaners, and general dog's bodies, whilst the men do, the serious work. So far, so 1950s. So the plot takes off when Colonel Edward Carruthers, played by Marshall Thompson, turns out to be the sole survivor of mankind's first Mars expedition. The rest of his crew have been brutally killed by him, it's assumed. And a second ship is sent to bring the murdering Martian explorer back to Earth to be court-martialed. Now, as I mentioned, they're all now trapped in space with a creature and they have nowhere to run and no way of defeating this alien menace. I love the fact that despite these guys being explorers, they have a ship full of guns and grenades, and also, despite this being a ship in the middle of cold space, they freely fire these guns and throw bombs about the place with just wild abandon. Now, yeah, it's of course great 50s B-movie fun. There's many movies such as this that are economically made and nothing but throwaway fun, manufactured to be shown at drive-in movie theatres or as one half of a double bill. And the real reason for checking this out, even if I'm honest, is to see the similarities and influences it would have on science fiction cinema itself, it being an early example of a genre that would come to be known as sci-fi horror. Of course, a movie like this can't hope to match the standards of Ridley Scott's chest-bursting, claustrophobic thrill ride, but considering at the time of its release, this was still a genre not given much in the way of critical respect, almost a genre for children and that new breed of peoples, the teenager. Now, this delivers genuine thrills. There's, of course, an inherent claustrophobia from being trapped in a vessel in space where you can't escape, and of course, no one can hear you scream. Now, one of the cool things about it, The Terror from Beyond Space, is that it's set on a rocket ship. So here the creature has to claw its way from one deck to the next, vertically up the rocket ship, giving the surviving crew members less and less space to hide. At one point leading to a rescue mission via a spacewalk in an attempt to come up behind the creature. Now, I'll talk about the monster itself in a moment or two, but first the idea of it stowing away on board the ship and using the air vents to move around, of course, is pure alien. Although I'm not sure if this presents a giant plot hole later on once the crew begin to simply seal the hatches between decks to keep it contained. Also, the sight of a trapped crew member using a flamethrower to fend off the Martian brute will bring a knowing smile. Now, the creature in this movie doesn't bleed acid or impregnate its victims. What it does is slowly absorb the moisture from humans that it grabs. And although there's no gore here, of course, the imagery of crew members slumped in air vents looking drained of life is still quite chilling. And the monster, although memorably a huge fanged maniac, works best when it's confined to the shadows, in all honesty, as its odd rubbery head will be the stuff of ridicule to many a modern audience member. Now, characterization as a whole here is kept very minimal. Now, of course, all the acting on show is what you'd expect from a film like this. The men are tough talking, the women scream a lot, and there's a love triangle half-heartedly included to give a few characters something to talk about between bouts of bullets and gas grenades.
Van, let's talk about it later.
There isn't any later, the way things look.
Now, this movie was directed by B-movie extraordinaire Edward L. Cahn, who was churning out these kinds of movies for fun during the 50s and early 60s. You'll know what kind of filmmaker he was when you see the title of this film, along with others he made, such as Creature with the Atom Brain, Invasion of the Hell Creatures, The She Creature, and The Curse of the Faceless Man. It, The Terror from Beyond Space was one of 5 movies he released in 1958, and if that's not impressive enough, in 1961 he released 11 movies. Don't get me wrong, it's not like he was making the 10 Commandments every month, but he clearly had a great work ethic and delivered consistently for the studio. Now, even though it's a 70-minute creature feature, at its core, it, The Terror from Beyond Space, does touch on themes of paranoia, exploration and isolation and the dangers of invading a foreign land. It's self-inspired by classic horror stories and sci-fi pulp magazines of the era. Now, much like Ridley Scott's movie, it wants to tap into our primal fears of being precariously trapped in an unhospitable environment with an unkillable antagonist. Now, in the tradition of these kinds of movies made at this time in our history, the film also delivers an ominous warning for mankind that we've clearly chosen to ignore in the past 60 odd years. Go check it out.
A planet so cruel, so hostile, that man may find it necessary to bypass it in his endeavor to explore and understand the universe. Another name for Mars is death.